So in this video, we're going to start looking at nodes. And we've looked a little bit at nodes as reference to materials, but simply we're going to be looking at geometry nodes and kind of expanding upon that in this section. Now, it'll allow us to make changes to objects using parameters rather than having to do it by hand. And this allows us to do like rapid iterations, various stuff. And I tend to like using this for plants. So that's going to be kind of our first tutorial, our first project is looking at how to kind of create iterative plant designs, such as trees or bushes or vines. So let's get started. So I'm going to start by creating a curve in a Bezier curve. So here's my curve. And just for the sake of this project, I'm just going to make it 90 degrees and have it just stay straight up and down. I can even rotate it around a little bit. And then we have a geometry nodes workspace up here, but let's go ahead and create our own workspace. So we could do that by just dragging and copying this window. And then I'm going to click up here, and then I'm going to change from my 3D viewpoint down to my geometry node editor. And we don't have any nodes created yet, so let's go ahead and create. So here is our first look at creating geometry nodes. So we have inputs and our final outputs. So we could start modifying this selection of the Bezier curve to start modifying it in ways that using these nodes that will reflect over here on our actual object. So the first one we can look at doing is if I drag off a node here, there's different ways I can add nodes. If I kind of drag one off, it'll let me search for it. I can also right click if I don't have anything selected, and I can add one. And which is great about this method is that it allows me to kind of go through and look at the different categories from like mesh to materials to curves. So it allows you to kind of really search for, if you're kind of exploring in the beginning, to better understand where everything goes. But I'm just going to just type stuff in this tutorial. So I'll go ahead and drag one off. We're going to say type in mesh. Look for curve to mesh. And then if you notice here, this is the input for my output. So if I wanted to change this, I could drop it in here. Now it wants a profile curve. So this is the shape that's going to go along this curve to create my mesh. So if I were to drag this off, I can just type in, let's do circle curve, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a circle, but it kind of gives you a good starting point. So you could do the resolution, just like how you would do like a cylinder. You can also control the radius like you would be able to do a cylinder. So I can go ahead and just, for now, let's just keep it at 0.1. You can also adjust the scale over here as well. So if I wanted to make this smaller, you could drop it down further. Well, what if I wanted it to actually change, right? Like say like this is like some kind of plant, and typically it's smaller at the bottom than it is at the top. So we're going to drag off a spline parameter. Double click, and as you can see, it's already creating a thickness change at the top. But what if I want to control this? Like, what if I want to have more effect over really how wide this goes? So let's create a map range. I'm going to do this off the. So this gives me a minimum and a max value that I can control to really give me how thick this thing could actually be. and then a max as well. And really control again, like how thick I want this kind of going up. So it gives me this control over the shape. And then this little thing here is this check mark allows me to fill the caps. Another thing you can do is you can also control the materials from this nodes panel as well. So if I were to drag this off and type in set material to geometry, I can go ahead and add a material through the nodes as well. Well, let's look at some stuff that might be a little bit harder to do modeling by hand. Because all this stuff so far is stuff that you could probably just go ahead and model it by hand. So if I drag this another node off of my input, my geometry, I'm going to type in resample curve. And what this will do is it will give me a point count of 10 points along my curve. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag another node off of this called instances from points. And this is going to allow me to attach certain objects or geometry to these points. So it's kind of hard to see right now. And then what I'm going to have to do, or what I want to do, is I want to combine this with my current geometry. So there is a join geometry node. And you notice that there's multiple input nodes here on this join geometry. So now I can drag this over here, and I can drag this on my output. And again, you can't really see anything yet because there's nothing attached to this instance. So for as the sake of this argument, we're going to type in curve line. So that's going to attach, if you see now, these lines to my curve. And now I can rotate these around, either over here, which will allow it to move around individually. If I want to move them around based on the axis of my main curve, it gives me some area there. And then say if I wanted to, create another resample curve in here and start doing multiple branches, I could. Well, to kind of speed things up a little bit, instead of adding in more and more lines, let's actually add some leaves right to this little plant. We'll just say this is just like a young sapling or just a regular house plant. And I can do an object to this as well. So I go to object, info, geometry, and now I can select one from that I've created within my project. And I've already done that. I've created a leaf here, and we'll kind of take a little side note as like how I went about creating this leaf. It's just a simple plane, but there's a transparent background on this texture. So I go over shading. If you are familiar with an image editing software, you notice that PNG files are often have a transparent background on them. That if you look here on my PNG file, it has like this checkerboard background, which means that there really is no background, that it's just this leaf. And that means that like everything around it has like this alpha pattern that anything that isn't part of the leaf is considered black or transparent. So I could also create a mask and just black everything out around that what I wanted to. But in Blender, in most node-based systems, if you just drag your alpha on a transparent object over to your alpha here in your shading node, it will allow you to do a transparent background. So I'll go back over to my node system. I'll select my branch again. So if I select my object under this object info, I can go ahead and select this plane that I created for my leaves. And now I have a series of leaves. But you can kind of control, again, how they rotate around the axis this way. But what if you wanted a little bit more control over, let's say maybe the randomness of how this is actually going to rotate? So let's go ahead and branch off an interesting node called rotate rotation. And it's a little confusing. And it's rotate rotation. I think I just did rotation. And it's weird names, but this will allow us to kind of give two parameters. One is a rotation and then rotation by. And I'm going to kind of split these off a little bit more so I can, again, assign random values to the X, Y, and Z. So if I were to, so I'm going to drag off this node, type in random, and then I will type in random on this one. And it gives me these random value parameters. And what I like to do right off the bat is take these max numbers and drop them down to 0, just to kind of give a baseline. And that's what these random values will give me. Is like, here's my, say like this is my X, Y, and Z. This is the minimum it could be. This is the maximum it could be. And then I will do the same over here. And I can just drop these down. So they're all at the same. And now I can go through and modify some of these and kind of understand what they do. So if I control, let's say this middle value on rotate by, and then I can let's up this to something similar. So now they're all kind of, having a somewhat more of a plant or a leaf type shape where they're kind of like facing towards the sun. And then I can kind of play around with some of these values over here as well. Like, well, maybe that's not the one I want. And then we can have it rotate around and kind of adjust these. You can also add randomization to, say, this scale as well, and kind of give it a little bit more randomness in the scale. Maybe some of it you don't want that much, right? Like this one is getting maybe too thin over there, and maybe that's not the effect that you want. You can also set ones up so you have more control over, which, as they kind of get up, create the range. As they get higher, they might get more smaller or larger. You can also control where these start. So if I go to this resample curve node and I interrupt it with a trim node, then I have this start and end. Then I can have it backwards. So I will start it at the bottom, kind of like most plants and trees where they don't necessarily start at the first like quarter of the plant. So now I have this, plant here. You can also like change like seed too, which affects the randomness. And you can adjust that again for whatever. Some will have better results than others to kind of understand what, again, you can kind of add some randomness. And then the great part too is you could still go over here and modify your curve like you had originally. So if I go to edit mode, it goes back to like
my curve points. And if it makes it, easier to see, you can always turn off, the output. Convert it back to a line. And it said if I wanted to add more points to this, I'm going to right click and go to subdivide. And then I have, this control over here as well and kind of move this around. If I wanted to reshape this or rotate, which way this was facing, I can do that too. If I wanted to add more points or more leaves, I can adjust this count. And again, if I want to play with the scale, I have an opportunity to do that as well. And drop maybe some of my max values down. I'm going to make it a little bit stockier. But it's starting to look like a vine. So if I want to turn this into a vine, I can take this point and then extrude it out. And it can kind of follow along that, that shape, but it still has these rules of the nodes. So now I want you to kind of take this basic principles and kind of expand upon it, see what kind of plants you can come up with, and kind of see what else you can do. Try to add, again, more branches and kind of sub branches and see, what happens if you add leaves to that. You can even change this image that I have into something that's three-dimensional. You can also have, if you notice in a lot of trees, have intersecting planes as well. And then as we kind of progress through this section of kind of focusing on more outdoor type stuff and nodes, look at other applications of nodes and kind of creating bigger and bigger systems as we go along.